My fellow Americans, welcome to Uncle Sam Finds Peace Through Politics podcast with your host, Uncle Sam Levin. Today, we are joined by somebody very special. We have the master of politics here. Today, I am joined by Chief Political Strategist and Macro Policy Sector Head for Hedgeye, Mr. JT Taylor.
Sam, man, great to be with you. Love this.
All right, thank you so much. First of all, we have to honor it. Today is President's Day. As much as people may not be listening on President's Day, we got to give it a shout out as we're a political show. Let's go into right now. We're in day 5 of a partial government shutdown, with everything to do with DHS funding, more specifically on the topic of ICE. Do you foresee this as the best solution for this problem?
Yeah, I mean, at some point they're going to have to come to grips with what's happened over the past. Again, depending on what side of the island you're on, or not depending on what side of the aisle you're on, they have to come to grips with what's happening with ICE right now. There's a disagreement in both parties on the approach, on the tactics. There is a middle ground here, and they can find it, Sam. It's just a matter of getting there. But if I could just take 1 second to go back and unravel this ridiculous Washington government shutdown cycle that we're in. It's been like this for years. I was a chief of staff on Capitol Hill. I think we came close to one back then. I'm not going to age myself, but we have almost 6 or 7. Congress has. Again, my point in all this is Congress, do your job. Congress has months and months and months to negotiate 12 appropriations bills, 12 bills that fund the government. And of course, we're down to 11 of the 12 are passed. DHS is the only one left. But if they did their job, the budgets are submitted sometime in February. The president submits a budget, Congress does a budget. They're aspirational. Throughout the year and the ensuing, 4 or 5 or 6 months, Congress decides on how to divvy up the money. And then every year we get to September and there's just no agreement between the parties. Don't go into recess. Don't go home. Stay in DC, do your job, and get this done before September 30th. It's not that hard, guys and women. At the end of the day, where we are today, Sam, again, as you said, 11 of 12 appropriations bills have passed. DHS hasn't. I think what's going to be a solution here, other than some compromise on ICE, is or a suggested solution going into this. This might last a couple of days, maybe even a couple of weeks. Congress doesn't come back until February 23rd. If there's an agreement between the White House and Democrats right now, what could happen is that both Senate Majority Leader Thune could call back the Senate, and of course, Speaker Johnson could call back the House. I think one's 48 hours, one's 72 hours, and get this passed. TSA workers, the Coast Guard, all these men and women are going without pay. They still have to show up for their jobs because they're considered priority workers. But in the meantime, Congress has to figure out, and the White House has to figure out a solution there. There's one at hand. And again, all I say is that if they can't figure out the ICE component of this, wall off the rest of the money, right? TSA, Coast Guard, Secret Service, all these other agencies, fund those, and then maybe there's enough money to fund ICE. ICE was funded by the big, beautiful bill last year. There's plenty of money for ICE this year. That's a
Right.
long answer, Sam.
No, I that was a great breakdown of it. And to your point about political parties, we'll get to that in a little bit because that's a deeper conversation about representatives doing their job. But when we talk about the biggest issue we're seeing right now in this country, at least one of them, is this division on the topic of ICE. And the point of this
Yeah.
podcast is try to find some unity. And I was going to ask, can two things be true? Can ICE be doing their job for the most part, while also they need to be acting in better, with better dignity and better humanity?
100%. 100%. If you look at where the American people are on this issue, a large majority of Americans want some immigration enforcement, right? And you could see that in every election. It sort of surprises me that Biden didn't do more in the 4 years he was in office, and that's not a pot shot. It's a fact. And I'll take pot shots at both parties here, as you'll soon see. But 4 years they had to solve, at least approach this immigration problem that got worse. I think most Americans would agree with where we're headed on immigration right now, directionally in some of these deportations. The tactics, I think, are where they have a problem. And you could see that in the polling numbers. So I think that the happy medium is find some common ground on the tactics and what ICE agents are or should and shouldn't be able to do here as they try to enforce one of the president's mandates.
Of course. And then again, can these two things be true going forward? Can it be true that the Republicans are right by saying that ICE agents are being attacked, doxxed? There's a huge increase in violence and threats against ICE, while also the Democrats' concerns about them wearing masks, cameras, identification, and using judicial warrants also be true? Can those two concerns have a middle ground?
Yeah, absolutely. You could find middle ground on both. I don't recall a time in history where I saw agents wearing masks, for example, or the on the other side, the judicial warrants. It's sort of that the process is a little bit warped right now, and directionally. I think I don't know where the common ground is, Sam, but I think just looking at there, if you're able to enunciate what your goals are as ICE, whether you're a DHS, whether you're the president or the head of Congress right now, if you're able to enunciate your goals, we're going to get there the right way, right? And does that involve wearing body cameras? Does it involve not wearing masks? Does that involve some sort of uh, a standard for approaching a car, a person, a protester? There's a way there, and I think both parties can be right. What's wrong right now, and we're trying to focus on what's right, is that everyone gets wrapped up in their own ecosystem, and nobody wants to find the middle. There is just a small, if you look at it and observe Capitol Hill, there's a small bipartisan group of senators, some House members that try to work together. Typically, they're the ones that are at the center of a lot of these negotiations. These are the same men and women who ended the first government shutdown. You had Schumer and the liberals were pissed that they went along with Thune to end the government shutdown. They exist. Bipartisanship exists. This center, this pragmatic center exists. You just have to find it and move it forward.
So
And
I'm
it's by the way, on issues like ICE, it is particularly dicey right now. So finding that center on ICE, finding that common ground on ICE is going to be really, really tough, but it's there.
right. And I'm gonna put a pin right there on this center piece because I want to circle back to it in a little bit. But to get there, we need to talk about another issue, something that you're very outspoken about and something that you are heavily believe in, which is the national debt. We have $39 trillion in the national debt, and a lot of this money that we're paying and is causing this debt is Social Security, Medicare, and the third biggest one is the interest that is accumulating on our debt. And there's really no way to accomplish this that will be politically popular for any party. And that's what it seems like everyone's kind of running away from. And to add to that, Donald Trump wants to increase the budget on our defense from $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion. So it doesn't seem like our spending habits are slowing down after his initial goal was to balance the budget. Let's make
Yes.
that clear. So where are we heading and are we headed towards trouble?
Yep. Let's take some pot shots at both parties. First, the Democrats traditionally have been the kings and queens of spending. I'm not saying they're responsible for the deficit. Absolutely not. It's both parties' fault. But if you look back at the Biden years, and you look at a lot of money that was thrown into the economy as a result of COVID and trying to come out of COVID, that added to the debt. Republicans have traditionally been fiscal conservatives, except when Trump is in office. Then all of a sudden they want to spend whatever Trump wants to spend. 1.5 trillion is unheard of when it comes to defense spending, a 50% increase over what we're spending this year. With that, there has to be some restraint. If you go back to what Doge tried to do, and I'm not a big fan again of Doge tactics, But Doge had the right mindset a year ago. The right mindset was to reduce the size of government, maybe reduce the size and scope of government. There's a right way to do it. And go to the agencies. Having worked at a federal agency, I worked in the executive branch, worked in the legislative branch. Go to each cabinet head at the beginning of your term and say, look, by June 1st, 2025, I'm doing this in retrospect, if I'm the head of Doge, Elon Musk at the time, and come up with a 5 to 10% cut in your workforce. If I go back 15, 20, 30 years in Congress, a 1% cut to an agency would have been unheard of back then. A 5 to 10% cut would be massive right now in these government agencies. But it's not, if you and I think you hit the nail on the head, Sam, take the government agencies aside. It's entitlements that are driving this debt right now. You said it, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, interest on the national debt just about equaled precisely what we're spending on defense. $1 trillion a year, which is just unheard of. So you've got to go back to these drivers of our debt. Again, in particular, the entitlements. I worked years ago with Speaker Paul Ryan, actually side by side, and Paul Ryan had a solution, or had maybe not a solution, but maybe a dialogue for reforming Social Security. Touched the third rail, and I'm not saying that Paul's solution was the right one, but directionally it was. But you have to have the willpower on both sides. He was slapped down by his own party before he could even approach that. So it is not going to be popular. It's coming, Sam. It's going to be you guys and your generation. It's going to have to deal with it more than mine. But it is right around the corner, this explosion, and there is again no willpower to tackle it. But the driver and the number one thing that has to be focused on will be entitlement reform. Social Security, as everyone approaches the retirement age, there are nobody who is in their 60s right now wants to hear we're going to raise the retirement age, right? But if you go and take the approach that, all right, guys, if you're in your 30s or 40s, prepare for it because we're going to raise the retirement age and when you could be entitled to Social Security. There are ways to tackle this that aren't going to be politically popular. You probably grandfather in the people that right now who are in Social Security, who are recipients of Medicare and Medicaid, grandfather in a certain segment. People are right around the corner, but right behind them, prepare them for changes. But the trajectory we're on is unsustainable.
1000%. And to break down Social Security a little bit, like you're saying, you just kind of danced around it, but the age of the expectancy of living in this country and the world has increased dramatically since Social Security was initially implemented. So the fact that we haven't really adjusted for it yet, as our population continues to grow exponentially, is a concern. And to most people, although it's unfortunate that you may have to work without Social Security 5 to 6 to 7 years longer, it is just simply makes more mathematical sense. And although I know everyone loves if they can get so-called free money or just money handed to them as soon as possible, but also it needs to make sense in why we're doing it. And I think right now it's actually counterintuitive to the initial reason of why we started it.
Uh, Raise the retirement age means test it. I mean, there are some folks that would opt out that are making significant money, have made a significant amount of money, and then there are doctors. I don't want to bring too much controversy into this, but it's saying working longer is better for you, or staying engaged somehow. So there's always a solution here, but it feels like as great as this country is, it feels like we're always we always have a hard time making these so-called adjustments that you referred to.
Right. And for someone that is in their second term that can't run again, emphasis on cannot run again by the Constitution,
Yeah.
it would make sense for somebody to try to make this decision because it's not necessarily political suicide for themselves. But in the end, in the long term, for Trump, he might not see the benefits of that so-called policy right now. but in a 2030 period, his legacy is actually left off better for fixing an issue that is a long-term fix, not a short-term fix.
Yeah, and again, he's going to need Congress to do this one. And there is absolutely, positively, I don't care, you put in Trump's name or Biden's name, Clinton's name, Obama, Bush, whomever, in a midterm election year, there is no way that Trump is even going to suggest touching entitlements this year, nor is any member of Congress going to talk about Social Security. Actually, there are a few brave souls up there that will talk about it, and will talk about it bravely on the campaign trail, but I could count them on one hand.
Right, and that's a perfect segue into this. A lot of people that are on their way out or don't have as much to lose seem to be pushing the big issues that are controversial and people don't want to talk about, but it also won't risk them with re-election. So as we talk about political parties, we talked about DHS funding and the people that they won't find the middle ground. There's a very select few that are in this middle ground. It's a very divided times where people have to vote for their parties, and if they're not, we've seen President Trump come at a certain part of that group, and I don't mean to keep going on President Trump, but it's just top of mind. And then Thomas Massey's a perfect example of that. He's pushing something that he feels is best for his constituents, as that's what Congress is supposed to be about. But it's not necessarily aligning with this Republican view. Same thing, Democratic, or for the Democrats, just the opposite. Do you think that all this polarization will eventually pull a party out of, like, not thin air, but into a middle ground state, or people were just so fundamentally built on these political parties that it won't ever end?
Yeah, it's going to be like this for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. I mean, I've always dreamed of a third party. And, if you go back to the founding fathers, they didn't envision parties,
No.
political parties or division when they founded this country. It wasn't until, a few years after Washington left, Washington did not register and did not talk about parties when he was the president. It wasn't until after him when they started to emerge. Uh, and so it feels as if we're just locked in right now. And I think what we need to do to break this logjam, and I think we're in sort of uncharted waters right now, is to have a viable third party. And then all of a sudden, the sensible, I don't care if you're the sensible middle, right? And that's not ideological, but it's just a sensible, pragmatic middle that wants to get things done prevails. You forget about the fringes. The fringes are making the most noise. The fringes are getting the most attention. That's what they want. Social media is driving that even more, which is harder to undo because everyone's living in their, as I said, their political ecosystem. So a third party getting out there to challenge the parties is exactly what's needed to break through this. And by the way, if I could go back to entitlement reform, I don't believe the next president, man, woman, Republican or Democrat, is going to be a transformational figure, unless I'm missing something in the current crop of people that are being mentioned. Some very good men and women out there on both sides of the aisle. With that, I think in order to break through all of this noise, all of this division, you really need someone transformational. He or she doesn't exist right now, and I don't believe he or she uh, um, needs to be a Republican or Democrat, or can be a Republican or Democrat for that matter.
Right, and I think it's important to note that when this country, like you said, was founded, George Washington on his last day wrote a letter saying that political parties would be a downfall to this country. And
Yep.
then, like you're saying, it didn't really emerge until the election of kind of 1800 when we started to see mudslinging and all of that, where this kind of political theater really stemmed and started. But something that I know you know well, and someone that is a very big confidant of yours, which would be Neil Howe. He wrote the book The Fourth Turning, and as much as people say that we're in uncharted waters and maybe uncharted territory, at the same time, it seems like he did predict this, that this was going to be the fourth turning, that this is predictable actually, that it's not necessarily unpredictable times. Do you believe in the fourth turning theory? And we can go into it if you
Yeah, I do. And I don't know how much time you want to spend on it, but I do believe in the fourth turning theory. We're in that cycle right now. and you go back to, and it just take us back again to the Civil War, which is also one of the turnings. When you talk about division, I mean, think about that for 1 second. Think about a member of Congress or in a Senate almost being caned to death by another senator. So when you want to talk about political division, this is not the first we've seen of it. Again, I think what's really problematic to me right now. I don't know if this is in a fourth turning sense or not. Maybe in a sense it's really bringing this to light is social media, is the fact that we can't separate truth from fiction,
Right. And
right?
just
It's really, really tough.
to explain a little further, just the fourth turning, it's this
Yeah, go
aspect
ahead.
of there's basically, if you want to think about it in four seasons: fall, winter, spring, and summer. Right now we're in the winter, which is called the fourth turning, and every so-called probably 100 years we break down into these four separate things, where into the 1970s and 1990s ish, it was more of a summertime, a real good feeling, a lot of less conforming and a lot of own thought and feeling. Then we move into the fall where things start to, the leaves start to fall off, and so do we. We kind of fall off the wagon. And right now we're in this winter, which is the fourth turning. And I think it's funny because I talked to my grandparents a lot about this, and it's like we've never seen division like this before. But then I started reading the fourth turning, and I realized they kind of haven't. That they're
Yeah,
not in this 100.
yeah.
They don't necessarily have the retrospect of another divisional time, because they were born into the wartime, the ending of a wartime, and then they were in very decent times. I know they lived through a few wars, but it's been the so-called summer and fall of the fourth turning theory.
Yeah, with a few exceptions, I'd say the Vietnam War was pretty divisive in this country. Again, before my time. But yeah, I think by and large, they have lived through a really good cycle. And I hate, Sam, I hate keep coming back to social media, but it's driving a lot of this, and it's something they didn't have to deal with back in their time. Like, and again, you can go back and think that, they had folks like Walter Cronkite. Again, just before my time, some really respected figures in media before, media did become right and left at some juncture over the last couple of decades. But it felt to me as if, if you study this a little further, that there were generally journalists that were centrist. They just reported the news. I think toward the end of this current turning, I think things migrated into again, media became polarized again.
Yeah, and that kind of comes into another book with his where Noam Chomsky's ideas, although in the Epstein files, but he had this idea about media where it was all about media is owned, and that when people have advertisements on media, you're like on a media platform, you're not going to speak out against it, and that the elite own the media, which is another aspect of it. So there's a lot of these interesting things that play into the media and what play into this political divisiveness. But now, as we move towards these midterms, it brings up a perfect thing about political parties, political division, while also bringing in this idea that basically companies can buy election wins in a general sense of this Citizens United versus America, where they're not considered people, so they can donate as much money to these campaigns as possible. So as we move towards the midterm elections, and there's a lot going on with the midterms, do you see that this craziness is going to be amped up over the next 9 months?
Yep, unabated. It probably is much or more than ever. I mean, you see it every cycle, and the floodgates are opening. I don't care whether you're a Musk guy or a George Soros guy on the other side. Those monies are going to keep pouring in to the various committees, again, corporations and individuals are limited giving to certain federal candidates, but to these other super PACs, it's just unlimited, and in some cases unidentifiable. So they could give it anonymously. So I believe it's a cancer in politics. I go back to one of the politicians I worked for decades ago, who said that a couple of things have contributed to the state of where we are now: money in politics, right? And again, as an ex-chief of staff I remember the days on Capitol Hill where you would wake up, go to a breakfast to your it would be a political breakfast to raise money, right? Early on, you go into the Capitol, into your office, your official office. You do the so-called people's work all day long. And lunchtime, you would go back to that political committee to dial for dollars. So you would call lobbyists at lunchtime to raise money for your member of Congress, back to work. And then at night, you'd go to dinners and fundraisers and receptions for other members of Congress to meet more people to raise money. It's a vicious, vicious cycle, and this is the job of a chief on Capitol Hill. It's sort of unseemly. The second part is the sort of advent of easy transportations. Easy transportation. Members of Congress would typically move their families here, like decades and decades ago, right? It was harder to get back to California, Alaska, week in, week out. And so families lived next to each other. Families uh, had soccer, football kids playing together. You wouldn't attack them on the floor of the House the next day or the Senate the next day. So there are a couple of factors. There are many social media. Again, there are many factors that contributed to. I know we're back onto this polarization thing, but it does come back to money. The root of all of this evil is money in politics. And as this is apostasy to people on the right, but I believe at some point we need to get back to federally funded campaigns and just say, look, here's $1 million for your district, and candidate X gets 500, and candidate Y gets 500,000. Yeah, 500,000, 500,000. Find some sort of parity. Require like two or three debates. Again, I know people are probably hair on fire with what I'm saying right now, but there's no other way out of it. These are untold sums of money, dark money going into politics. Sometimes foreign money, as we found out, and both sides of the aisle is going into politics, but into our elections. And I'm not saying Russian money. I'm saying that there have been contributions made and returned by both parties to people who have contributed illegally. And it's good that they recognize that, but put an end to this madness.
Yeah, I mean, and but it seems like there is no end. But it is
There's no
interesting.
end.
There's you've seen John Fetterman, who's broken away from his party a little bit, which has been nice to see actually. And then you've seen Marjorie Taylor Greene for the first time in since her coming into office in 2020, where she's broken away from the party a little bit. And that to me has been a breath of fresh air to see that they're actually not just bought out by these issues, and they actually maybe do have a thought for their own besides a Democrat brain or a Republican brain. That is nice to see. Do you maybe see a trend going forward of more people starting to break away?
We could. Yeah, I think Fetterman's the senator from my home state of Pennsylvania. Surprised to see and happy to see he is become a little bit more of a maverick. We need more mavericks. We need more. Again, this is going back to an independent mold here. You have again a handful of Democrats, a handful of Republicans, the people I keep speaking to that are solving these problems or these impasses when we get to them on Capitol Hill. I think we might see a few more, but I worry about I do worry about Trump's grip on the Republican Party right now, and people really are opposed. Members of Congress really are opposed to going at him. You see what the consequences are. To go at him, you have to retire,
Right.
right? You
100%.
saw that in Ernst. You saw that in Tillis. You saw that
McConnell.
in McConnell, and so on and so forth. And that's not healthy. And I don't, yeah, that's just not healthy for any party. You have to have some sort of vocal opposition and some sort of guardrails. So I do think that if the midterms don't go the direction that the Republicans want to go, I do think you'll see many more independent-minded Republicans out there speaking out. Um, but I think we wait to the end of this decade before we see any significant change. I could be wrong there.
I agree. I think we still have major political figureheads, people like Trump, even Obama,
Yep.
Biden. There's some people that have been in the public light for some time that have such holds on these political figures and parties that, not to say it dies with them necessarily, because that sounds super grim, but this super thing like these guys are our guys, and that they are the end all be all will end eventually once they stop getting in everyone's ears, which I think, like you're saying, will be in the end of the decade, which will be a very nice thing, I believe, for the country.
Yeah.
And then we've been talking a lot about elections, but we can't talk about elections without the biggest election so-called controversy right now, which is the SAVE Act, which is supposedly going to require ID for when you go to vote. And Democrats have been against this, where Republicans have been pushing this. And it seems as although I think it is actually a good idea, it seems rather quick to implement when an election's only 9 months away. What are
Yeah.
your feelings on trying to push something so quickly?
You can't, it's you're trying to govern elections in 50 states and you're pushing it through in a partisan way without it actually going through a committee. So check my math at some point, Sam, but I don't think it actually went through a committee. I think Speaker Johnson just said, we're just bringing this bill to the floor.
Yes.
And there is some Republican opposition to it, by the way. I think Senator Murkowski of Alaska has come out against it for, I think, one of the reasons you mentioned. It's just, why are we doing this so quickly? Why are we doing this in a partisan way? And by the way, it shouldn't be one size fits all. Alaska is going to be different from the other 49,
Right.
right? The one element I do believe in save is to have some sort of ID when you show up to vote. I do believe in mail-in voting. I mean, to talk about Alaska, let's look at Montana, look at some of these other rural states. I mean, how else are you going to get to the ballot box? Another thing is that the Conservative Heritage Foundation, I know you've heard of the Heritage Foundation, had a study on voting and voter fraud. And I believe, and again, check my math here, Sam, is there have been 68 cases, 6-8, not 6-7, 6-8, 68 cases of voter fraud, of illegals trying to register to vote or trying to vote over the years. So it seems as if some of this is targeted at um, the immigrant population voting, illegal immigrant population voting. I don't believe that's the problem. I don't believe that there is a voter fraud problem. Is there voter fraud in elections? Yes. As the Heritage Foundation will point out, and I don't want to overstate this, infinitesimal. It is very, very small, not enough to move the needle.
Yeah, I believe it was 0.0002% or something around that number, which is so very small. But I think for that small of a number, the greater public of America still believes that there are a lot of fraudulent things going on in elections, which
Yes.
again has been proven to be untrue. So I do like the idea of, an extra barrier that shows people that there is fair and free elections. And if that institutes more of a confidence in our elections, in our country, then I'm for it.
Same.
And
To
then,
voter ID.
right. And then to be fair, I think a bigger concern in elections is foreign governments more than uh, our own people illegally voting, which is a totally another conversation that people are probably not going to touch. But I think that is also a problem.
Agree. That influence. I just go back to I go back to 2016, 2020, and 2024. Trump was elected in 2016. There was no voter fraud.
Right. Although there was the Russian voting scandal.
Yeah. Which was what?
2016. But it was proven to be that there was a controversy around that
Yes.
election.
The rigged election by the Republican, but Trump won.
Yes.
But then he lost, and then of course that's when this all comes to light. And he lost in when he was in power, when he controlled the Department of Justice, and his own attorney general said there was no significant fraud. So to be talking about voter fraud in going into 2026 shows me that they're a little worried. Again, this is cyclical. Every incumbent president in the midterms, most income, you probably know the numbers better than I do, loses seats in Congress,
almost
right?
every time.
And there have been a few exceptions, and I do believe Trump is bracing for that this time around. This is Trump's legislation. This is what he wanted, and so let's see what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do
And then
think that it passed the House last week. I think given Murkowski's opposition in the Senate, I don't know that it can't advance or won't advance, but you're going to need 60 votes to break the filibuster. I don't think you have that.
no, that is exactly what it seems like. Even the name is escaping me right now, but another Republican, Susan Collins, just
Collins,
joined.
yep.
She just joined in on the vote, but it's still, again, not enough for a majority or anything to break a filibuster.
And Trump has said if it goes down in the House and Senate, or if it goes down in Congress, that they'll issue an executive order. So let's see what that means
Right, exactly. And
and how that
executive
stands up.
Right, an executive order has almost a little bit lost its standing and its power, you know. When there's an executive order in World War One and World War Two with like Japanese, that really and then the internment camps, that meant a whole heck of a lot more than what executive orders mean now, because it seems like that's what every president currently in the current modern age is trying to roll out. So there's a little loss of meaning there with an executive order. And then now moving forward, let's talk about the midterms. Like you said, there is expected to be somewhat of a blue wave, but it's not necessarily a blue wave as what the term blue of a wave usually meant, where you're gaining a bunch of seats. Still, even if they win the House, they only expected maybe to have a one seat majority, and the Senate isn't really supposed to move. Most people expect that the Senate still remains Republican. Is that what you are seeing as well?
Yeah, there is a again, a lot of people there recent spate of polls are showing that Trump's approval rating is lower than it has been historically, lower than it was in his first term. And you typically peg that to a certain number of losses in the House, seats in the House. I think it might be, should the Democrats stay on this trajectory right now and Trump's approval rating stay as low as it is, I do think that voters uh, may show up, and I think that might be greater than that one seat you had mentioned. I think that a Speaker Jeffries might be more realistic as we enter the summer and fall if things remain the same, right? I think the Senate is an uphill battle regardless, but it is much more in play now given the approval ratings. Again, this is sort of the midterms are uh, a gauge of how people are feeling about the president and of course about the economy and about affordability. So if he does make more advances on the affordability issue this year, voters vote their pocketbook or pocketbooks, then yeah, I think the Republicans have a shot. Right now they're not convinced. And you're seeing that in some of these polling numbers. You had a couple of special elections that startled me this past fall in Virginia, right across the river here, in New Jersey. A couple things happened in Texas recently, in Mississippi, statewide seats that showed that independents and minorities are moving back toward the Democrats. So the problem with the Democrats is they're not giving a reason to vote for them,
Right.
right? They might be voting against Trump, but the Democrats are just and again, I'm sort of surprised at this, but for the first time in years, they're unified on the affordability issue. If they just stick with affordability this year, and if things don't change, I think they have it won. But I don't know that the Democrats have it in them to stay unified when it comes to some of these issues. But with that, again, current trajectory, I think the Democrats will probably pick up anywhere from 5 to 10 seats. And a lot can change between now and in November. I do think the Senate is going to be close. I do think the Republicans have an edge and will keep the edge.
Right. And then it's just good to note as well that over 70% of districts are considered now safe districts, which makes a big flip of, of a House or the Senate very difficult for any political party.
Sam, check my math. That number's higher.
I lowballed it because I don't want to be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is higher.
So 430, this is one of my favorite stats, and we could do the math. 435 seats in the House. How many are up for grabs?
I'm unsure.
Somewhere between 25 and 30.
Okay.
So it comes down, think about this. Roughly 400, you're probably not wrong when you say 70% are safe, but it's actually more than 70%, but more than approximately 90% are safe or relatively safe.
Which is concerning a little bit if the math.
200 on each side,
Right.
200 safe, 200 ruby red, well, ruby red to red, royal blue to blue, and then it comes down to 35-ish purple states and purple districts ever in by the way, some of those states that we've heard we hear about a lot in our presidential elections.
Yeah,
Michigan,
exactly,
Pennsylvania.
which would be a swing state kind of thing. So
Yep.
now leading forward, we've kind of hinted at this a bunch. You have, on one hand, a lot of people rejecting this Republican ideology that was once voted for in 2024 with a very substantial win, and on the other hand, you have people going for Democrats, but not really for their message. So going into 2028, when people are going to be running for president. Last time we saw the failure of the Democrats to focus on the necessarily hard-hitting issues when they focused on a lot of minority group issues, things like transgender rights and woman rights and that kind of narrative, where Republicans were like, "Hey, things aren't affordable. There's an open border," and they touched a very massive issue compared to a lot of small sector issues. Do you think the Democrats will change their way of campaigning going into the 2028 election?
They have to if they want to win. I think they there's an autopsy every 4 years. Every party who loses does this. Apparently, there was an autopsy done by the Democrats that hasn't been made public, but I'm willing to bet you that somewhere in that document, one of the top three reasons is a focus on transgender rights, and that I don't care where you are in the issue, but that is concerning to such a small, go back to that Heritage Foundation stat, 0.00002% of the population is going to vote on that issue. So stop talking about it,
Right.
right? Start talking about the issues that's not meant to be offensive. That's meant to just say, if they want to win, talk about the issues the majority of the Americans want to hear about. They already know where the Democrats and where Kamala Harris stood on transgender rights, right? They already knew where she stood. To be talking about it week in, week out, week in, week out, campaign in, campaign out, instead of talking about inflation, affordability, what were you going to do about the economy? Was a big whiff for them. I think they learned that lesson. Let's just see if they can, again, as I said, miraculously, since the fall, they've stuck together on the affordability issue. If they can continue to do that throughout this year, just like the Republicans and Trump did in 2024 on inflation, and cost of living, then they probably have a winning side for them.
1000%. And, especially when Kamala only had 107 days, you can't be wasting time, unfortunately, on the small sector issues. You don't have time to do that in a campaign. And now looking towards 2028, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I have a few candidates in mind of people that I think both Democratic and Republicans should run to A, give the country the best thing, best chance of just doing well, more of a unifying message, and then also the people that I think probably have the best chance to win. I'm going to ask you first. Who do you think are some of those people?
Damn, I wanted you to go first, Sam. On the Republican side, I do think it's going to come down to two people, unless something changes dramatically between now and 2027, when this will start. It's Rubio and Vance,
Yep.
and would I would say, and I would argue that Rubio is probably the better candidate of the two. On the Democratic side, I'm going to be a little all over the map, but I think you've got people like Bashir of Kentucky. You've got one of my favorite Democratic candidates, Shapiro of Pennsylvania. Um, I don't know that Buttigieg stands a chance right now. I know I'm missing a few others. I don't know Elizabeth Warren will do it. Bernie is too old. Ocasio-Cortez is too left, even though she'll make noise. The skunk at the garden party, of course, is Newsom. I think if Newsom were from any other state and were a little bit more moderate, it'd be his to lose. But I think Newsom is formidable, given the fact that he hasn't left the scene since 2025. He's out there fighting the fight every single day, and unfortunately,
Sorry, keep going.
yeah, unfortunately, he's running a state that is not in great shape right now, and people are fleeing the state. And he is moving to the center a bit, but the Democrats need a firebrand, to carry their mantle. There is a dark horse. She probably won't be top of mind for president, but maybe a vice presidential pick is Gina Raimondo, former governor of Rhode Island, who was a former Secretary of Commerce, centrist, whip smart, quick. I think would be a really good candidate for the Dems as well on the ticket somewhere.
Yeah,
Who are yours?
so I agree with the Vance Rubio. I think Rubio's the better of the two. I don't think Vance really has anything. If you look at his political stances from 2016 to now, it is vitally different, and that is a concerning thing. That as a president, you can just switch up your views so much in such a short amount of time. When you look at the Democrats, I agree with all the people you named. Some people in mind, I think Andy Bashir, to be a governor in a red state and still have people vote for you and respect you, that's a big deal. I worry that his personality isn't big enough to run
Yep.
a viable campaign. Uh, I don't think he can win, but I think Mark Kelly from Arizona,
Oh yeah, Scott
especially
Kelly.
after everyone going after him, I think he has something to necessarily run on. The fact that they were trying to take him down. Newsom, although he probably looks and acts the most presidential, he has no. If you go for any issue that he's done in California, there's a laundry list and there's too much to attack. But then you go into the people, unfortunately, that the Democrats have a lot of minorities, and that's not widely recognized in America. You look at Kamala Harris, who's a African American and a woman. You have, you said Elizabeth Warren or Wynne Gretchmore. She's a woman. You have Josh Shapiro, who is a Jewish American. You have Wes Moore, who's an African American. It's like Pete Buttigieg, who is a gay American. It's like you have all these things that people can to knock on. So if I were to choose Andy Bashir, dark horse here. I love his podcast every Wednesday, Straight Shooter with Stephen A. I know it's crazy for someone coming from
Yeah,
sports, but when you listen to him talk, he really does talk like an independent and a middle grounder. And he really does know what he's talking about. And I know if people can get over the sports thing, I do believe he's actually a very good political candidate. That's just my
yeah. I like that, and I did omit Mark Kelly. He's on that list for sure. We may have to revert back to, or the Democrats may have to revert to, a Kelly Shapiro type personality, right? Kind of bland. Actually, to me, Shapiro's got a little, again, from Pennsylvania. Um, when you have a Democratic governor winning in a purple state, and who has I think, high 50s approval
yes.
rating right now. That says something. And he's just really good. He's not as bland as Kelly. He's not as excitable or as presidential as you said as Newsom is, but he's a good administrator. He's a good thinker. And he gives some great speeches. I mean, he did toward the end of the campaign for Harris and after he did a better job than she did. So I would not rule out Shapiro. Again, I know that America still has to get through some of these barriers, but I like Steven. And I do think they have to stay away from. I think uh, they have to stay away from the left, the far
100%.
left on this one.
And then to wrap this up, as we
And
talk,
oh wait, by the way, I forgot. You mentioned Gretchen Whitmer. Gretchen Whitmer could be at the top or the bottom of the ticket. I think she'd be exceptional, and I think she's playing her cards right now. She should have been. I go back. I'm sorry, Sam. She should have been top three or top four for me on
yes,
the Democratic side. And I don't mean to drone on about this, but Whitmer, I think, is again a blue governor in a purple state, effective administrator, and is playing her cards right. She's not kowtowing to Trump, and she's not battling him week in, week out. She's playing the game and she's doing it well.
100%. And to wrap this kind of conversation up, I think it's important. There is a ton of viable candidates. It's just which one will hold the best message for the American people.
Yep.
And I guess we'll wait and see on that one. And to close the podcast, because it's President's Day, I know we talked about this. I need to hear who are your top three presidents all time, and then your top one and why it is.
I think I think number one has to be George Washington by far. I mean, when you I don't care if you're a fan of Ken Burns or not, but just check out the American Revolution piece he did recently, just to go back and remember historically what the country went through, what Washington and our country went through, our fledgling nation went through. 8 years on the precipice of disaster, so many different times, Sam, so many different times, threadbare military, starving winters, brutal winter. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And the Burns piece brought it all back to light for me. The fact that that man withstood everything, continued to continued to push us forward, battle the British day in, day out during that entire time, along with, again, we had many other folks in his support system. So obviously, credit doesn't go simply to Washington, but Washington was the driving force. So I think Washington has to be number one. Lincoln has to be number two. Just in so many respects, in trying to bring the nation together, ending slavery, getting us beyond that. And I think my third favorite, this is going to be not what you want to hear, is maybe a combination of Roosevelt, Truman, and Eisenhower. Just a during that period to get us out of the Great Depression. Again, I had plenty of disagreements on other Roosevelt programs, but to get us out of the Depression through World War II. Once World War II was over, we went from Truman to Eisenhower. How we established ourselves as the foundation, the bedrock of democracy globally through that period. We came out probably, we started off maybe in question at the beginning of that period. We ended up at the top at the end of that period. Exceptional presidents combined.
That's a great combination of presidents right there. Real good.
Yes.
Well, on President's Day, we honor all the presidents. As my favorite would probably have to go with exactly what you're saying. We could definitely nitpick, to make the greatest president of all time with each of their strengths and weaknesses. But I really thank you for coming
Yep.
on today. This has been an awesome conversation. For
Yep.
everyone listening, get involved in your political anything that you can do to create some unity and share your opinions and try to listen to other people. That's the most important thing about this podcast. Again, JT Taylor, thank you so much.
Let's get back on before the midterms.
Let's do it. Thank you.